Hello and thanks for joining us. From James Franco's love letter to the worst film ever, to a peek behind the blood-stained curtains of a real-life cannibalistic serial killer's teenage years. Welcome to France 24's weekly film show.
Nobody respect my vision. You are a villain. I do this whole movie for you, Greg. You are tearing me apart, Lisa.
Get out of your shell. You need to be more normal.
I'm just like anybody else.
And we're joined in the studio by our film critic, Lisa Nesselson. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
Now, out in France this week is The Disaster Artist. It's directed by and stars James Franco as real-life amateur filmmaker Tommy Wiseau. Now, his 2003 film, The Room, is often referred to as the worst film ever made. Is this a good movie about a bad movie?
Absolutely. I loved every minute of this film. Tommy Wiseau has a vision defect. He can't see obstacles like most people can. If he decided he was going to be a Formula One race car driver, he would probably dismiss the idea that maybe he should learn how to drive a regular car and maybe get a license first. We go to the movies to see characters, and Tommy is a character, all right. He can't act, but he's determined to be an actor. He's obsessed with James Dean, and in acting class he meets a fellow student, 19-year-old Greg Sestero, who also admires Dean. Before he knows it, Greg has been drawn into Tommy's orbit, which is completely generous and benevolent, if astoundingly spontaneous and downright weird. Maybe that's one of the biggest surprises, because Tommy looks and sounds a bit like a modern-day vampire, and yet he's just a really sweet guy who happens to wear his hair very long and dye it very, very black. So, in 2003, when nobody in the entertainment industry will give him a break, he decides to make his own damn movie. Writing, producing, directing, and unfortunately, starring. Those who have seen it say it probably is the worst movie ever made. The Room, about a love triangle, cost $6 million and didn't even take in $2,000. Here's director James Franco as Tommy, dealing with some lines that he himself wrote.
Scene 112, take 13, mark it, action.
I did not hit her. Okay, line.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Take 17, action.
I hit her.
No! Do you want to change the line?
Script is script. Script stays same.
You're doing great, man. We'll get there.
Action. Action! Action!
You have
Action!
to say it loud. I can't hear in here.
Now, it definitely doesn't look promising, but in the 15 years since it was first shown in Los Angeles at Wiseau's expense, this film has become pretty cult, hasn't it?
It has. It was meant as a serious drama. Wiseau himself cites Tennessee Williams, but it built a following as an inadvertent comedy. This is a completely American story because failure somehow turns into success through the iron will and deep pockets of one very strange man and his so-called disaster piece. James Franco and his real-life brother Dave are excellent as Tommy and Greg, and there is clearly something wrong with Tommy, but Greg accepts him absolutely as he is. He's supportive, he's sincere, where most people would say, geez, that guy talks funny. I really don't think he's from New Orleans like he claims. Greg takes Tommy at his strange accented word. I've still never seen The Room, and I'm sad that I was out of town when it was shown recently in Paris at a 3,000-seat cinema. Here, with the real Tommy by his side, it's the real Greg Sestero.
It's an insane story. It's something that when people see this film, they want to know what happened. And I think what's great to me is that the story behind the film, I think, is unique and inspiring and also very funny, and it complements the film very well. And I think for me, it was a chance to tell, you know, a unique story about friendship and what it's like to follow your dream and just really being in the thick of this very bizarre experience.
I think this is an amazingly entertaining and ultimately touching story about the making of a bad movie, and I hope you see it. And when you do, promise me you will stay until the very, 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 very end. Do not stand up until the movie is over. Why do I say this? I saw this at the Warner Brothers screening room, and only 4 or 5 of us stayed, and we could not believe that our colleagues left because they cheated themselves out of a wonderful gift. So this is your chance to prove that you are smarter than the average film critic. Remain seated.
That's your advice for every film, though, isn't it? Another film about a real-life character is available in France this week. It's slightly different. My Friend Dahmer is a portrait of a serial killer as a young man.
It is. Ross Lynch, whose background is mostly in wholesome Disney-style fare, brilliantly embodies the budding serial cannibal to be in this period perfect ode to dysfunction in plain sight. This is set in the last year of high school of Jeffrey Dahmer and the 3 weeks after. Now, most people in the U.S. know his name. Why? Because beginning in the late 1970s, he started killing people, all male, dismembering them and bleaching their bones or pouring hydrochloric acid into their skulls. He got away with it between 1978 and 1991, killing 17 people. If you're going to grow up to be a notorious serial killer, you could do far worse than to have comics artist and illustrator Dirk Backderf as a classmate. The film is a brilliant adaptation of Dirk Backderf's graphic novel about Jeffrey, who he hung out with their senior year. All the acting is superb, but Anne Heche dazzles as Jeffrey's discombobulated mom. What I love about this film is the blend of sinister and funny. Here's a glimpse of what we would now call warning signs.
Wanted to see what its insides looked like.
Jeff's a little off, you know? Why are you doing this?
It interests me.
We need to talk. You need to get out of the show.
Looks pretty daunting. Now, My Friend Dahmer is one of the first films being offered by a new French online film viewing service called ecinema.com, isn't it?
Yes, this is devoted to making available good films for a small fee that have not found distribution in regular movie theaters. ecinema.com, which began in December and that, like its bigger cousin Netflix, some people believe is the future of movie viewing, is the only way to see this terrific portrait of the Milwaukee cannibal here in France. But feel free to seek out this amazingly good film however you can elsewhere.
Okay, well, next to a film without any characters, plot, or narrative structure, and its title is notoriously hard to pronounce. And tell us about Godfrey Reggio and Philip Glass's 1982 Koyaanisqatsi, that's being re-released in a restored version in France.
I must have seen this 3 times when it came out here in France in 1983. I wore out my audio cassette of Philip Glass's hypnotic musical score, the first one he ever composed for a film. Koyaanisqatsi is a Hopi word that translates roughly as life out of balance. Director Godfrey Reggio, who like so many directors spent 14 years fasting and praying in a seminary before he turned to filmmaking, set out with extraordinary cameraman Ron Frick between 1975 and 1982, incorporating found footage and doing a lot of magnificent time-lapse passages to portray what he calls the beauty of the beast. And what could have been a bigger marketing headache than when Prince changed his name to the artist formerly known as Prince? Apparently, Reggio didn't want to give his film a title at all, contending that, quote, language can no longer describe the world we're living in.
And it was Francis Ford Coppola's last-minute support of the film that brought it into mainstream cinemas. It's an environmental movie.
This film is wall-to-wall evidence that most of us are not living in harmony with nature, and that hasn't improved since. Seeing it again actually brought tears to my eyes. IBM punch cards, payphones, a Betamax ad, old Times Square, old Las Vegas, Oscar Mayer hot dog and Twinkie factories. Factory work is absolutely dreadful, especially speeded up. Video arcades and Pac-Man and Space Invader. Pants are still flared. Shoes are mostly leather. It's mysterious and gloriously visual.
And out this week in France on DVD is American documentary filmmaker Frederick Wiseman's ExLibris, the New York Public Library. It's a whole 3 hours and 17 minutes.
Yes, it is. But honestly, I didn't notice because I was too caught up in this fascinating look at the world's 3rd largest public library, which includes not only its magnificent headquarters with the Lions in Manhattan, but 92 sites throughout the boroughs. Wiseman, who is 88 and has been making his brand of documentary his whole life, often with French funding, uses the fly-on-the-wall technique. There's no voiceover, just well-shot and well-edited sequences of real situations in real locations.
And a library, Lisa, does it make for good cinema?
Well, if you're my age and you needed to do research as a kid, you'd start out something like this. Hey, Mom, what's the Emancipation Proclamation? And she'd shout back, look it up. Worth a try, right? If your family was well off enough to own a set of encyclopedias, then you'd start there. Otherwise, you'd go to the library. This marvelous film was shot before you-know-who, the poster child for sustained ignorance, moved into the White House, and what jumps out at me is how well it really shows what devoted public service looks like. You see obviously highly educated administrators genuinely taking into account what their less privileged patrons might want or expect from the library. In a poor neighborhood whose residents can't afford access to the internet, they actually loan them internet hotspots free of charge. One man explains how when he wanted to learn something because he couldn't afford to go to college, whether it was to wire a house or make a movie, he'd go read up on it for free at the library. And he taught himself with those valuable, again, free public resources. It's become a trend to blurt out to members of the military when you spot them, thank you for your service. This movie made me want to run up to librarians and say, thank you for your service.
Lisa, well, thank you for your service and your lovely eclectic mix of films that you brought to us today. We're going to leave you with Frederick Wiseman's ExLibris, the New York Public Library. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
There are 127 city agencies. We probably do business with 30 or 40 of them. We're out there trying to improve the lives of the people and the communities that we serve.
I couldn't afford to go to film school. I learned from the library.
So one of the things I want to do is I want to continue to add value to people.
What I took for granted is the importance of the public value of what we do. We do mind-building, soul-affirming, life-saving work.